Well, I don't know what it feels like to be a god, but I would imagine it felt godlike. There's initial fun and surprise at watching people react. So you press a key and all of a sudden something happens, something else happens. And then after the initial fascination wears off, you can focus on being deliberate and seeing how you can actually do choreography and how you can make a series of things happen that tell a story. So it's quite captivating. And I found myself constantly thinking about kids, my daughter who's 4.5, of how this can be a tool to teach them about, one, just being free, about moving and reacting, being comfortable with other groups of people without having to have a social plan, and at the same time, the idea of people being able to come together in an imaginative way to accomplish, whether it's a work of art or having fun, and doing this in what to me is a completely new form. One of the things which fascinates me about the TERP experience is that it is a novel form of storytelling. And storytelling is an ancient and honorable profession. One could argue that, contrary to popular rumor, it's probably the oldest profession. It's how we think about things, it's how we remember things. We're intrinsically pictorial and visual people. So if I say Statue of Liberty, you get a picture of the Statue of Liberty in your head. If I say dog or cat, you can't help but see a dog or cat. If I say World Trade Center, you get a series of buildings, you get a series of airplanes flying into them, you get a series of sequences, because how we make things memorable, how we remember things, are a series of three-dimensional events in three-dimensional space. What therefore to me is interesting about TERPing is it is yet another degree of freedom of how one creates these stories, how one interacts with these stories, and how these stories become ultimately part of our lives. Well, I think the notion of taking TERP as it is now, which is largely specialty hardware and software based, and turning it into a more app-like form where people can participate with their own hardware and where the social network formed by the TERPers is traveling over the public network so that it is effectively unlimited in space, so that people could be TERPing in Moscow and New York and in the Okefenokee swamp at the same time, is exciting. Now the question is then, how does that sort of distributed shared experience change from the local shared experience that TERP is up until now? Does it, should it? But to me, what's most exciting is TERPing is another form of social networking. And so the question is, what happens when you collide that with traditional forms of social networking, especially in that there effectively are no traditional forms, in that that is all in a state of evolution. So the exciting potential for me is, how do we take the world of dance, of movement, and interpretive motion in conveying emotion through motion? And how do we put that into a network form where people can participate, especially kids, where they're in the process of finding themselves, of finding how to express themselves creatively, and to be able to do that in a form which is not just a local and isolated phenomena, or not just something which is pre-rehearsed, but is more dynamic and live. It's very exciting. To me, it's interesting that if you look at the history of invention, and by invention I mean things that people had to sit down, think about, and create. The ones that endure, the ones that have changed our world, the ones that create inflection points that if you look back, you say the world changed then. We have movable type, we have the telephone, we have the telegraph, we have the invention of how music is recorded, we have television, we have the internet when it became multimedia capable. These inventions have one thing in common. They're all about storytelling. They're about lowering the barriers of storytelling, and by that I mean, how do you reach a larger audience in a language they can understand and do it in the most economical and efficient way. Any invention that has ever done that in the history of mankind has been largely permanent. It may evolve. We don't have Edison wax recordings, but we have iPods, and iPods replaced 6-track tapes, 8-track tapes, replaced all of the media that came before it. If you look at the history of human invention, the inventions that have involved storytelling, how to do it to a larger audience, better, in a more compelling way, they've all been permanent. if you look at terping from that perspective, it's potentially a very significant contribution in a new way to think about dance, movement, motion, and a new form of storytelling.